Hi, and welcome to the Career Upgrade podcast, where we help seasoned IT professionals get more and better career opportunities. So, if you are a CTO, a CIO, an IT director, and technical lead, you will enjoy today's episode with George McGehrin. And George is running a multi-million dollar business. In fact, three businesses. The first one focuses on executive search, the second one on branding, professional and personal branding, and the third one on career talent development. So with George, we are going to talk about his experience helping executives with their career, and I'm really excited about this. So without any further ado, let's dive right in.
I appreciate you having me on today. And we also work with people that are in Europe, right? So we work with a lot of executives in Europe as well. Mm-hmm. And there's also, sometimes there's a disconnect. There's a huge difference, obviously, between the European executive and the American executive, but there's a couple of commonalities also, right? So.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing I struggled when I was the CTO was actually how to position, how to brand myself as the CTO, right? Because for us IT people, it's not really easy to talk about our achievements, and we are just introverts generally. So this is actually also my first question. Like, what would you recommend IT professionals who are by nature introverted and suddenly they are supposed to tell a story about their accomplishments and achievements, and how they should present on the social media, on LinkedIn?
Right. So I think first of all, you have to be comfortable with the story, right? Like, you have to be. I think sometimes you have people that they tell one story that about themselves that isn't, and that's the problem. But I think you have to be truthful about, number one, the story you're telling. Number two, people are working with you for usually 2 or 3 reasons, right? Maybe 4. And I think there's common denominator: job, your current job, your future job, with why people hire you and why they work with you. And I think focus on those 3 or 4 things over and over, and I think it makes life a little easier, right? It's and the third thing, which you and I know each other because of a training, a training group that we're involved in together, is that I think you always have to be sort of sharpening the saw, right? And continually improving upon just, you're just sort of not only your professional brand, but your personal, brand and activity and sports and how you are as a person. And I think if you do a little of that, you'll have an easier time reflecting that, like the marketplace. But I think you have to really know there's usually 3 or 4 skill sets why you're getting hired, right? Like, your clients hire you probably because of the same reason over and over. And you have to be comfortable with that. It's a great question.
I see. Yeah, I see. And this is also what some of those IT executives ask me when we at Career Upgrade Tools also try to help them, or we approach them with probably a better opportunity, and they say like, hey Michael, this is so cool, but I'm already busy at work. I have no time to post on Facebook or on LinkedIn. I know it's important, but the last item on my to-do list. So how would you approach at least this problem? It's probably not even a problem, but it's like a missing opportunity, isn't it?
Right. And I think a lot of these come down to like compound interest, right? Where if you put, let's say you put €1 in an account, let's say you put 10,000 euros in an account, and you wait 7 years, then that 10,000 becomes 20,000 euros, right? It will probably double. And I think you have to look at a lot of these things like compound interest. There's a ton of things that you'll do that don't pay dividends, right? So I think one of the problems you see is that people say, oh, I posted something and nobody responded, and I got two likes or what have you. But the accumulation of that is really important, right? So if you think of it like a bucket of just, water, and just drop, eventually it fills up. And you see, I think it's a really important, you have to, a lot of those things become habits. And I think if you can, so either do it yourself, right? Which is the harder way, or you can, if you don't have the time, you can pay somebody to do it. And and just make sure that they're on schedule, right? I'm a fan of, we talked about this prior, right? I'm a huge fan of delegation. And I've got 30,000 contacts on LinkedIn, for example. I don't personally manage my LinkedIn account, right? So if I did, I mean, I would do a terrible job, right? Like I just would be, because I don't have the time. So I think if you don't have the time, then delegate that task to somebody else. There's so many resources, right? You can find people anywhere in the world that will do it quite cheaply. But we live in a world where people Google each other, right? And if somebody were to Google me, Google George McGehrin, you know, every LinkedIn shows up, all of my podcasts that I've been interviewed on show up. So you need to be conscious of that, you know, the reality that we live in, especially if you're quote unquote in business, right? Which everybody's in business for something, right? So it's a great question.
At least in business of selling themselves, right? As IT professionals in our case. So,
well, and everyone is this is sometimes I think, you know, like sales is a dirty word, right? But you know, you're a CTO, right? I mean, you're a salesperson at the end of the day. You're selling, or you're championing, you know, they use different words, the ideas that you have to clients, and if they agree with them or not agree, I mean, they're buying that message, right? You've got behind you, you've got the ClickFunnels book series, right?
oh yeah.
I mean, look at how well he sells. I mean, even when he does a video about process and flowcharts about the funnel, and he's a salesperson, right? But he's able to convey his thoughts. I mean, we're all, you know, I've got two kids, a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and the 6-year-old is a salesperson. Like when he wants something, right? So I think you have to realize that everything in this world I mean, in general, it's a sales, you know, we are in sales, but you can add value at the same time, right? You can serve your clients and your team. And, you know, that's a big problem that IT people have, right? You got, as a general rule, IT people are focused on the project, but they're not focused on the macro of why am I doing this, you know?
Yeah.
And
It's
go ahead.
So true. And especially, you know, what sells these days is LinkedIn profile, right? As you mentioned,
100%.
people just go to LinkedIn, they look through the profile, the summary, and past experience, and they immediately have some image in their mind, right? Which is probably something that, again, is, you know, on the last item of the IT professionals to-do list. Because whenever I look at some of those profiles, I'm like, oh my god, like, you know, why don't you improve it a little? Why don't you have a photo of you speaking in front of an audience, or, you know, some of these pre-framing elements? Are there any tips? You know, some low-hanging fruit that you would recommend to IT managers?
Well, really low-hanging fruit is in the about section on LinkedIn, right? You know, there's an opportunity. You can write in the summary section. You can put your email address, like for networking opportunities. Feel free to email me and because as recruiters, as you know, right, the hardest part of getting to somebody is trying to actually get to them, right? And so I think that's number one. Number two, and this is I guess an example, right? You could have the most amazing LinkedIn profile, right? You could have the most amazing biography, you know, but if you don't do anything with it, then it's useless. And I'll use the example of the, let me see, I use the example of the phone, right? So an iPhone, right? So, okay. So this phone, I mean, I can, you know, I've got a 79-year-old mother who's about to turn 80. She has dementia, right? So I could give her this phone and she won't, quite frankly, I mean, she can't do anything with the phone, right? I could give you the phone and you might make €1 million because of the phone. So you have to be careful of you know, like, you have a tool in front of you, you need to use it. Just don't have the tool, you know? So it's like having a wonderful car and you don't turn it on. So I think a lot of people, the mistake people make is they have LinkedIn, they have amazing contacts, they don't reach out to people, they're not connecting. And, you know, there's, you know, I think there's the basics like that, right? It's a people to people game. And you and I mean, before we had a problem with the audio, right? The video was kind of off. And I was sort of insistent, like, hey, let's do video. Like, let's try again. Let's do video. because people work with people, right? They don't work with emails or sounds. They work with people. So
So
I
true.
think use LinkedIn as a people resource and not a data resource, and you'll do much better. So I've made millions of dollars on my LinkedIn profile, like from the profile, because I've got 30,000 contacts, right? So I could just, have 30,000 contacts. I could email them all day, or you could see who's great, who's interesting, and actually have conversations with the people. That's how you profit from like a LinkedIn profile or Facebook, or you and I are talking because of a Facebook group, right? Like that's the power of this, and I think there's like 20,000 people in that Facebook group or something ridiculous, but you were smart. Like you were proactive, and you reached out to me, right? You're like, hey, like, listen, I've got this awesome podcast. Do you want to be on a show? This is what we talk about. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. Awesome. Like it's exactly aligned with what, yeah. We get a lot of requests to be on shows, and a lot of times we turn it down because the values aren't aligned, So, it's you need to use the tool, like use the iPhone, and like, you can, do something with it. Just don't let it sit there like a coaster. So that's the biggest mistake. People are afraid to do things. I don't know why, like they're afraid to take chances, or afraid to, I mean, you get this because you're an entrepreneur, so you understand risk, but just a normal employee is kind of, sometimes we're not taught that in school, right? To take risk. And it's a problem, it's a problem for a lot of people. Just internally, you just don't have the confidence to take risk. And, it's scary to reach out to somebody you don't know and say, hey, can you be on my podcast? Like, that's not easy, like, but you have to, without the risk, there's no benefit, So I would say, LinkedIn, contacts, people you work with, like you use the tool, and then you just have a better career and other things, really a better life with a lot of things. So
yeah, well, you are throwing so many golden nuggets here that I don't even know which one to choose. And
kind of going off. I'm like, yeah,
I would I would probably just choose one. You mentioned that people are not willing to take risk, right? And probably in IT, also the situation, or the market situation, is a little against these IT professionals in terms of, they have so many opportunities generally, especially while they are not like very, very senior CTOs, CIOs, but while they are senior developers, team leads, right? Like there is an abundance of opportunities for them. So what I observed on the market, they sort of hesitate reaching out to, not even reaching out, just responding to recruiters. And they, from my observation, they don't even do this proactive reach out, or sending messages to recruiters, headhunters, and then suddenly they get to a point in their career when they are just, they don't have these opportunities anymore, and they are facing this situation suddenly.
So you bring up a great point. You see this over and over. You see really well-paid senior developers, right? And so you see that we used to recruit developers back in the day. Now we recruit very high-level executives. But when I started, we were recruiting, developers, programmers, like it's just engineers. So they start off as a software engineer, then they become a senior, let's say, so a senior software engineer, and then they, get maybe the director of development role, right, or director of engineering, and they kind of stay there, right? Like that's it. They just stay there, and the ones that don't stay there, the ones that move up to the CIO role or CTO role or a CISO role, they're the ones that think about strategy. They think about chess playing. They think about how the business runs, right? And they just happen to have a technical background, but they become sort of the pseudo COO, and you need a network initially when you're younger, because later on, like you see a lot of 50 to 60-year-old, like they're just senior programmers, and they've been there for 25 years, and they stay at this financial level, and you see that over and over and over in your space, like I mean, you're totally right about that. One of the things I can tell you, Michael, when I travel quite a lot to Silicon Valley, and you'll be at a bar, and you'll meet somebody, you're like, hey, like, what do you do? And they're like, oh, I work for a startup, and they're like, oh, cool. Or I founded a startup. You're like, oh, what do you guys do? You know, they tell you about it, and you're like, oh, what's the how are your sales? You know, like how are things going? They'll say, well, we just raised, you know, XYZ dollars. We just raised this fund of money, you know, and then we raised another fund. And you're like, okay, cool, but like, what's the business? Like, who's going to buy your? So they're fixated on the technology, right, of the problem they're solving, but they're not fixated on the business. But if you look at people like the Aaron Levy, have you followed him from Box? I don't know if you follow him at all. Aaron Levy.
No.
So Box.com, or even, you know, the guy Dropbox, right? This guy Drew. Look at all these companies, the ones that have done really well, the tech companies. When they when they're interviewed, they're really talking about the business. They're not talking about the technology or the deep, you know, or the you know, they're focused on the business model, you know. So I would say the difference, if you're a software engineer and you need to, and you think you're underpaid and undervalued, start thinking like a CEO, a CIO, a COO, and not just a technical guy, because they just stay stagnant. You know, they stay at this level where they just don't advance. You've seen that over and over.
Yeah, so true. This is a great advice, and it also reminds me what you mentioned just a while ago, that they should proactively reach out to build their network, right, to recruiters, headhunters. But also one of the questions I get usually is, who should I get in touch with, right? Like if you just go to LinkedIn, there are so many recruiters. You know, most of them don't know anything about IT. Very few know a little about IT, and there are very, very few really good IT recruiters. So who should these IT managers, IT executives actually reach out to, so they get
right? I would say like you talk about low hanging fruit, right? The low hanging fruit is, you know, you obviously, let's say you're a developer, a lot of your friends are probably developers. You could probably ask some of your friends around and say, hey, do you know somebody that you've used or who's ever placed you that was good? That's probably the best place to start, right? Instead of just blindly figuring out who to talk to. I would start with my friends and family and just people that I work with, and they'll give you can easily find one or two people that way, right? Or even three. And the other thing too, you bring up a great point about not responding to recruiters, right? You know this. I mean, you reach out to people and they say, well, like, I'm not interested. The funny, I get this all the time. Like, this is even at the C level, you know. I had spoken to somebody 2 weeks ago that I called. Like, I was just a call. You know, we had a call set up, but I called the person and I said, like, hey, I've got this opportunity. It's, you know, and literally the person said, I'm not interested. Like, I'm not at all interested in whatever you've got, right? And it was a $1 million. So you have to listen. The total comp was $1 million, right? So I just said. So then I said to the gentleman, I said, like, listen, well, if you know anybody that wants to make, you know, roughly $1 million, you know, then let me know, and I'll, you know, send them my way. And then the person said, whoa, like $1 million, like what? I'm only making $120,000 a year, you know, and that's why he makes $120,000 a year. He's making assumptions about things without getting all the information. Whole life he'll be missing out on opportunities, right? And cues and so I think you need to go in with an open mind and, you know, listen to the opportunity. When a recruiter calls you, listen to the opportunity. If it's not for you, turn it down, right? And, you know, and maybe you have somebody, if it's not for you, maybe you have someone in mind that it is for, and you can recommend them. It just, there's a lot of, just don't say no to things before knowing the whole, right? I mean, as a developer, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't just say, no, this is impossible. Like, I don't need to know any more information, right? As a developer, you would curiously figure out, let me go in, let me, like, in a copious way, let me just really dig in and see what the problem is, right? So I think, you know, use that skill set and listen to people when they have an opportunity. Like, when Michael calls for an opportunity, you should listen to the opportunity and then say no, right? Like, how many people people tell you no without even knowing the opportunity, right? It's silly.
So true. And now I'm just thinking that I'm also guilty of this, because sometimes I receive on LinkedIn these messages from, I don't know, software development companies, or I don't know, like so many people reaching out trying to sell something. And as you say, you know, often I don't even listen to their opportunity, which
Yeah.
probably like this is really good, a good point, because often I just make an assumption based on a pitch that I've heard, I don't know, 3 years ago probably, and now I'm just assuming that the pitch that is coming today is the same as the one that I listened to 3 years ago, but I rejected probably another 200 pitches along the way.
Well,
So,
and maybe that one pitch was, one pitch could have changed your life, right? You just didn't listen to it. But I think, if you look at, if you look at, and by the way, as a software developer and really anything, appreciate the fact that you're still wanted, right? Because I see on the other side, there's this thing called ageism, right? Where you see people that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, right? Well, really 50s and 60s. They complain, they tell me, like, George, I'm not getting the calls I used to get, right? Like, I'm not getting the activity I used to get. What do I do? So eventually it goes away. Like the interest, it's kind of like, it's like a beautiful woman, a beautiful girl, right? Like sometimes they get spoiled with all the attention, and then, they get older and older and older, and some of that attention goes away. So I would say appreciate it, well, if you can. I'm talking about the career aspect of this, but I think, listen. I'll listen to an opportunity all day. Like if somebody calls me and says, I've got an opportunity, okay, let's hear it, right? And then you can say, it's not for me. But the smart ones, I don't know. It's kind of like dating, right? Like you don't go into a bar or you don't go to school thinking you're gonna get married, or, I mean, I've been married for quite some time now. I literally walked into a bar to sell a bunch of laptops to a friend of mine who was a bartender. And next thing you know, like I meet, I don't know, I met my wife, right? So you have to be open-minded about a lot of different things. But if somebody says they have an opportunity, like you should, all ears, you should listen to the opportunity. So, yeah.
That's very true, very true. And this actually reminded me a webinar that I did earlier today for a group of students in the Netherlands. And one of the students, he was 45.
Right.
And he asked me a question like, hey, Michael, I'm 45 now. I'm going through this program. I'm reskilling myself. I don't recall his previous job, but he's entering the IT market as a junior developer, or he will enter in 3 months after he graduates this program. And he was asking me, Michael, but people are not taking me, they are not inviting me for interviews. And this is, this reminds me of what you just mentioned, about being on the market, like wanted on the market. So what would you recommend such person who is,
right? So yeah, so that person, they have a strategy problem, right? They need to, like, they need to, they're probably applying the things online, right? They're sending emails. They're probably doing it. I mean, they're just doing it that way. They need it. He's the 45-year-old. So I'm 45, right? I mean, so I'm the same age, right? So, I mean, I'm not going to say back then, but before the internet and LinkedIn, right? The way we would get a job back then, I would knock on my neighbor's door and say, hey, I need a job. The neighbor would say, well, there's a guy you should talk to. I'd talk to the guy. So that technique still works today, right? Most of the jobs, even at the higher level, they're not advertised. Like we don't advertise, for example, the roles that we recruit for. We don't advertise the roles. We spend $0 on advertising for jobs, right? To find candidates. So the 45-year-old needs to think about people he's worked with, right? He's got 25 years. Think about, and he should be networking with everybody on that webinar, right? Because they're also going to get employed. You need to start networking and creating these personal relationships. If he's not going to he won't get a job by applying to things, click, click, send, here's your job, Mr. 45-year-old. It doesn't work that way, right? So if we should do, I don't know, I would probably say, hey, Michael, can you and I talk later, this week to do a call? Do you have any people that I might be a good fit for? Do you have any friends, and I'm open to other things besides the Netherlands. Do you have any friends in Germany or in France or in Spain? So he needs to play the networking game, number one. Number two, he needs to statistically, like he has a math problem, he needs to write it down and see what the numbers are between his problem is a math problem, right? So if I spoke to 100 people, if I send out 50 emails, let's say his email, I send out 50 emails and it became 10 phone calls, and 10 phone calls became 2 interviews, and 2 interviews became 1 offer, then he needs to, he needs to think about sending out, more emails or talking to more people. But he has a math problem. He has to work the math and reverse engineer the situation. It's a strategy problem. It's an activity problem, and it's a networking problem. That's his problem. It's not that he's 45 years old, right? He's just blaming the 45, like, oh, I'm 45, I can't find a job. It's not that. That's not the reason. It's his activity is not properly being, he's not properly conducting the strategy of it or executing on it.
You are right with the networking. I guess for us IT people, for us introverts generally, this is even harder because networking.
Well, you say that, but you say you're introverted, but you're not, right?
Well, I'm just playing.
Yeah,
I'm playing an extrovert now.
I love it.
In front of the camera, but generally, I try to avoid human interaction, or I'm just exaggerating a little. But if I think about my colleagues, about the developers I worked with, team leads, VP of engineering, our colleagues within the IT, like most of them were really introverts, and they hesitated networking with people, which is, I guess, one of the issues within this area, because lots of these approaches work really well in, I don't know, sales or business development,
right,
etc. But it's difficult for them just to make this shift like overnight.
Right. Well, I mean, but the techniques work, right? But and this because you've seen it's most people have, and you hear this in every book, you see this in every book. It's all in their head, like if they're, what their people, the people value them differently than sometimes people value, like internally, right? So, I've got a guy on my team, right? His work is like phenomenal. But then you talk to him, you're like, hey, how do you feel that you're like, how do you feel that your work, like if you were to rate your work, and he doesn't think it's as great as it is, right? But it's great work. So, someone else's image of you sometimes is different than your own, but that's a mental thing, like you have to get your head straight, right? You have to decide, like, hey, do I want to advance in life, and maybe do I want to would I like to be a CIO or a VP of, and if the answer is yes, then just kind of like, oh, I can't do it. It doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I'm just a huge optimist with anything, right? Like I run these ultra marathons, and I don't know, I just, like it's the mind shift is, you hear it over and over, but it's so true, like if you're, I don't know, like if you think you're ugly, then you're ugly, if you think you're good looking, then maybe you're not good looking anyway. But like if you like it's one of these things where you have to be like you just have to be happy with yourself, and you have to, it's a big problem for a lot of people, right? They just lack this confidence, and like you say, you don't like talking to people, right? But you do, like it's and you have a good personality. So I would say, like, use your personality to, like use that to advance, right? Or use that to meet different people, or I don't know. I think, there's things you can do to make that, to change yourself. So I'll give you one tip, by the way. This is a really interesting exercise that I've seen people do. Like, try to do one uncomfortable thing every day, just one, right? Just one. I mean, that's it. Maybe for someone it's like saying hi to the guy that they're walking, the person they're walking past them, right? Hey, maybe that's uncomfortable for you, but I think if you do that over and over, it becomes easy, and I don't know, my viewpoint's a little probably extreme, but you and I have the same destiny. Like, we're both gonna die, right? Like, it's just the way it is, so like, it doesn't matter, it really doesn't matter, like, what if you fail, or we're both we'll be dead in the next 50 years, both of us, right? So 50, 60 years. Yeah. I'll be dead sooner than you will, but I mean, you're like a young guy, so but it doesn't matter, like, it doesn't matter. So you need to get over it, just get over that mentality, that it's a mind shift, sort of thing.
I like this mindset. It's really cool to realize that you will die anyway. So why not to increase the challenges on that, along the way.
Well, let me give you an example. I'll give you an example. I got into running 12 years ago. I started running a lot, and so I'd run my first 10K. I was like, oh, this is cool, and then I ran a half marathon, so the 21K, and I was in this running group, and we're talking, and they were all like seasoned marathon runners, right? All of them. And there was one guy, right? One guy was a guy he was in Spain. He was like Mr. Ultra Marathon. He'd done so many ultra marathons, and we're running together, all of us. And I made a comment. I was like, oh, it'd be cool to do a ultra, like it'd be totally cool. And all of the marathon runners said to me, George, like, you need to do the marathon before you can do an ultra, like 80 kilometers. Like, that's nuts. Like, do the 42 kilometers first. And I said to the Spanish guy, I don't know if you knew this, but I speak Spanish as well, right? So we're talking in Spanish here. And I said to him, I was like, hey, will you train me to do an 80 kilometer? Like, I've never done a marathon before, but will you train me? He's like, yeah, I'll train you. And all of these marathon runners told me it was impossible, like impossible, right? So, Michael, before I ever ran a marathon, like a 42 kilometer event, I had run 6 ultra marathons first. So I went from 21K, you know what I mean? So who says it's all here, and you don't need to listen to other people. Like, don't listen to them because they're wrong. And the one question I said to the marathon runners when they were telling me I can't do it, I said, well, like, how many ultra marathons have you run? And they're like, well, 0, and it just, you know what I mean? Like, it's this limited beliefs, you hear it everywhere, but it's so true, like, people just need to get up and like do stuff. And it's, I don't know, I'm not saying you need to challenge yourself uncomfortably once a day like that. Like, don't go, but just don't listen to people. People have no idea. Usually, a lot of times it's their fears that they're giving you, they're not, they're usually 100% wrong, I don't know. Everything I've done, I've been advised, don't start a business. My parents said, don't start a business. You'll be broke. Didn't happen that way. Don't go to school in Europe. I went to school in Europe for a little bit, right? Don't go to school in Europe. I went there. Don't live in Barcelona, like, I did that. Don't live in South America. I did that. My next thing is I'm going to learn how to fly planes, which everybody's telling me not to do. Like, don't learn how to fly planes. I'm going to do that, So, like, it's all here, man. It's all here.
The people around us are overprotecting, right? So this is the common problem.
Well, they're protecting their own. They're protecting their own fears. It's not yours. They're not yours, And I don't know. Sometimes, you don't need to. I think one of the mistakes people make is they go to other people for validation. Like, hey, I'm thinking of this idea. Like, I might want to fly planes or learn how to fly. Do you think that's a good idea? You don't need to ask people for. You really don't need to ask people for validation or justification or approval. Like, if you think it's the right idea, then you do it, and if people aren't on board with it, then that's their problem. It's not, eventually people get on board, like it's eventually, when I started my business, it took me a while to have any success. We've got 30 people. We just hired 10 more. So now we're going to have 40 people on my team. Right. But everybody, that was a terrible idea. And it was a terrible idea. It was a terrible idea to start a business, right? Like, it wasn't a good idea, but eventually 20 years later, we've got 5 businesses now, that we run. So there's a lot of things you just can't, don't listen to people because they're totally, totally wrong. Yeah.
So true. Well, this is really inspirational. And it also reminds me, one of the quotes we have different, quotes hanging on the wall. And one is from Nelson Mandela. He said, it always seems impossible until it is done. So it's like,
what a great story, right? 18 years, right? 18 years in jail. Unbelievable story. And he's and he talks about, I think in one of he talks about looking out this window, right? Or this, or it was just what a great story, but he's totally, and Nelson Mandela, he passed away. Like, everybody passes away, right? At the end of the day. And you need to believe, there was a I was reading an article. I didn't know we were going to talk about Nelson Mandela today, but he was telling people in his own prison, oh yeah, it's awesome. It always seems impossible until it's done. Yeah, I love it. Love it. It's he was convincing the prison guards, right, that there's going to be change, like he's like, there's going to be change. And everybody thought he was crazy, like crazy, because at the time when he was, right, it was like, there was a different party in power. The concept of him being is just impossible. But the whole plan was, as they say, it was like in his head first, right? Mm-hmm. Einstein, I don't know if you knew this about Einstein. Einstein started, this whole thing about, like all of his theories. It was in his head as he was 16 years old, and he had these ideas in his head, So you have all these great people that a lot of times it's just, there's a story I read about Einstein. He was trying to outrun the speed of light. Like he was, as a kid, 16 years old, he would run and he would say, I'm going to see if I can outrun the speed of light, just to see if I can do it, And
that's like spirit. He should have run those ultra marathons, right?
yeah. So it's but I mean, you know how it is. It's one of these things where a lot of times, like you went from working for somebody else to working for yourself, right? And the whole thing is, the whole thing was in your head, right? Like there's no textbook on this, right? It's just like, okay, you made the choice from one day to the next. I'm not going to work for somebody ever again. I'm going to have, I'm going to do it myself and just, determine, there's pros and cons. Like right now for you, it's 9 o'clock at night, right? So but there's the freedom of choice. And if you can choose wisely and choose and do stuff, that life becomes much sweeter, when you're able to do exactly, what you want to do. I'm today, by the way, I'm in a hotel room, right? I've got this thing behind me, but I'm kind of like, I'm in this beautiful part of Connecticut called Mystic, Connecticut. It's like, it's bays and boats, and it's beautiful. But I get to do that, like I get to do that if I need to. If I don't need to go. COVID is different, but I don't need to go into an office, right? Because it's the weekday. You get to control your own destiny. But that all started in my head. It all started, mentally, by dreaming, right? So it's great. It's not impossible. What's the exact quote? So I'm going to write this down because I love these. So what's the exact quote? I'm going to write this down because I'm going to.
The exact quote says, "It always seems impossible until it is done." Nelson Mandela. And we have these quotes also for our children. We have like, "There is no substitute for hard work." Thomas Edison actually mentioned it's over there on that wall. So that was also good.
It's great. It's a great thing to teach your kids, right? I've got 2 kids, and like I teach my kids all the time. I'm like, my kid, my 9-year-old thinks he's going to be a professional, football player, right? So he's like fascinated with football. I'm like, and somebody had told him that he's not going to be a professional football player, and I just said, listen, like, how do they don't know that? Like maybe, like they don't know that you're, like who are they to tell you that you're not going to be a professional football player? Like, don't listen to these people, they're wrong, So it's great to teach your kids that, and listen, maybe he probably won't be a football player, right? He won't be, but at least he lets you get the dream and practice and so you're spot on, man. You're spot on, Michael, about that.
Thank you. Well, it's all about mindset at the end of the day, right? You already mentioned this totally. In regards to the IT professionals, right? Improving their profiles and going out there, talk to people. So you touched upon so many different interesting things. I also want to be cautious about your time, right? And I don't want to take too much of it. So many interesting insights coming from you. So probably we could wrap it up here. Unless you have like one last thing that you would like to recommend to all those CTOs or CIOs, technical people here, and wondering what does this COVID situation means for their career. Is there anything you've seen on the market?
I think one of the things is that, a lot of times, like you said, a lot of software, like, folks in IT, they hide behind the computer, right? Or they hide behind a laptop or the tech. With COVID, there's going to be much more ability, and I mean, much more opportunity to hide behind the tech, right? So don't get, make sure that people know who you are. And if you have to do FaceTime, videos or Zoom calls, but make sure to keep the people connection. I think that's a really important thing. It's you need to make sure that people know who you are, and don't, this is the thing I see over and over, from candidates or people, they ask for favors, right, when they need them, but when other people ask for favors, they don't really give any, so you need to continually give things to people and do favors for people and think about them and opportunities. And, hey, Michael, I've got a client for you, or I've got an opportunity. Like, so continually, give, if you sort of give first, eventually things come full circle. And I think that's a big thing that IT folks, but that's don't make sure that you're getting seen from people, and don't hide behind the technology. That's probably the biggest sort of thing I would say.
Wonderful. This is golden. All right, cool. Thanks a lot. Thank you for being on this show, and I hope to talk to you soon again. Thank you. It was fun.
Michael, awesome. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.